For as long as the Punisher has existed in print, fans of the character like me and many of you have expressed our immense interest in more live-action representation for Frank Castle. Recently, Marvel Studios did treat us to a pretty good showcase of what Jon Bernthal's continued take on the character is up to, and they've confirmed a Marvel special presentation which Bernthal wrote himself and promises to deliver on an adaptation of the character we've been waiting for. But before Bernthal, who does play the character perfectly, we had Ray Stevenson playing the Punisher in the very bloody, very brutal, and a little bit schlocky Punisher Warzone. And before that, we had Thomas Jane in the highly underrated 2004 film starring him and John Travolta. But I know you guys, while some of you may be fans of Jon Bernthal or Ray Stevenson or Thomas Jane, you want to hear me talk about Dolph Ludgren. That's right, folks, fasten your seatbelts, because today we are taking it all the way back to the beginning and talking about the Punisher 1989. Or 1990. Or shit, 1991? 1989's The Punisher is the very first cinematic outing that Frank Castle ever received, and is a criminally underrated adaptation of early Punisher comics. Sort of.
What, are you kidding?
Directed by successful film editor Mark Goldblatt and starring Dolph Lundgren as our battle-hardened brute force vigilante.
If you're guilty, you're dead.
The movie comes with its own set of struggles to find its place in Hollywood, much like any of the attempts to adapt it before or since. But Goldblatt persevered, and against the steep odds got the movie made and released to the world in 1989. Or 1990, depending on what continent you were living on. But the question isn't, what happened to this movie? Or, how did it get made? Or, is Dolph Lundgren gonna be in Avengers Secret Wars?
Bullshit! You're bullshit!
But instead, my friends, what I find the most fascinating is the one question that nobody seems to be asking about this movie. Is this really a Punisher movie? Yes, and here's why. For the uninitiated, Frank Castle, aka The Punisher, is a primarily New York-based vigilante who uses his years of elite special forces training and military skills to hunt down and brutally execute criminals and wrongdoers alike, but mainly the mob. The character was created by Jerry Conway in 1974 for Marvel Comics and made his first appearance alongside Spider-Man. While you could almost say that he started off as a villain for the webhead, he quickly pivoted into being a gritty anti-hero with an almost Batman-like appeal. And as interest in the Punisher comics rised to popularity, so did Hollywood's interest in cashing in on the property.
Every day the children of God is gonna cost you money.
So there had been talks of a Punisher movie as early back as 1980, but nothing ever came from these initial plans because, simply, comic book movies just weren't cool yet, with Superman the movie being the only truly successful cape flick on the market.
I'd listen to this, man.
But when New World Pictures and Carol Co. got their glorious, schlocky hands on this dark and gritty property, we were finally gonna get our movie. But then something happened. Upon its release, fans seemed to be puzzled by what exactly they were watching.
Holy God, what are you showing me? Hey, come on!
Let's address the elephant in the room here, folks. Where the fuck is that big white skull emblem on his chest?
Whoa.
Director Mark Goldblatt has talked about this online in the years since making this movie, but basically during the movie's development, the Punisher still had a very comic booky look and costume design. He'd been designed by John Romita Sr. to have a sleek, skin-tight black bodysuit with white boots and white gloves and a giant skull on his chest that connected to his ammo, which, by the way, is so good. But at the time, the filmmakers involved didn't see it translating to the screen, and they had to redesign the character for live action. This included giving him a very promising 80s black leather aesthetic, which really looks similar to how the Punisher is drawn in comic books these days. But without the logo. Why? Well, honestly, Goldblatt just didn't fuck with it like that. He thought the logo was a few too many steps in the silly direction and decided against using it. However, the filmmaker has since expressed regret in not putting the logo on the chest and missing out on the character recognition. Although he did put little skull logos on the Punisher's throwing knives, so I think that's gotta count for something.
Take that message to your people.
Of course, I'm not gonna let a missing logo ruin my fun, but for some, this change and the exclusion of any supporting characters from the original source material made some viewers feel let down. And to that I can only say that in the director's cut there's a deleted scene where Frank's kids are wearing Spider-Man pajamas.
What?
Putting aside the differences between the film and the source material, let's talk about what makes this movie a Punisher film nonetheless. Frank's ultimate motivation is to avenge the death of his family by punishing the wicked and the corrupt. A tale as old as Batman.
Hi.
But this movie does hold Frank to those exact morals, as Ludgren truly has this stoic, edgy guy with a secret heart of gold thing down pat in his performance.
What's this?
Happy anniversary.
The movie mostly takes place at night, and being that it was shot on location in New York, Goldblatt captured the dank and damp streets of the city with pure cinematic excellence. It looks like the pages of the Punisher comics came to life. I would even have to go as far as to say that the set design of this movie is probably my favorite part and potentially the most comic book accurate thing about this movie. In this film, Frank lives in a sewer and has been a vigilante on the run for over 5 years. In that time, he's grown fond of the local misplaced folk around him, and including his best friend Shake.
Don't worry about this poor old slob. Get on the case, do the job. Hey!
Yeah, he speaks in rhyme. They ought to call him Shakespeare.
Come out. Come out, wherever you are.
The plot of this movie is quite simple and fairly Punisher-esque with a few big differences. A mob overlord wants to merge all of the city's most powerful crime families together for ultimate dominance. Then the Yakuza gets word of this and tries to take them down for ultimate dominance. If you read the Punisher comic books, you know that if there's one thing Frank wouldn't do, it would be help the mob. But in this movie, he kind of collabs with the crime families of New York in order to take out the Yakuza. This is also a bit of a deviation from the character, and one that probably annoys Punisher readers the most. But in my opinion, it really doesn't take away from the plot or the character, as we learn early in the movie that over the last 5 years, he's killed over 100 mobsters in New York City alone, and done it with the same brutality and force that you would expect.
Thank you for your cooperation.
And speaking of that, let's talk about the guts. To me, the core of the Punisher is a man that has suffered horrible loss and unimaginable pain, and dishes out that pain to anyone even remotely wicked. His pain became his power. But also, and I'm sorry if you disagree with this, but it has to be brutal.
What do you want?
The movie does pack a lot of action into its brisk runtime. We get some great explosions, tons, and I mean tons of gunfire and some knife play, and some pretty decent hand-to-hand combat just to complete the action movie hit list. While I think the most violent Punisher movie remains Punisher Warzone, and I have high hopes for whatever comes next with Bernthal's take, this movie doesn't shy away from showing you, and at the very least alluding to, very violent kills and straight up bloody punishment. It's kind of like for everything they changed about the source material, they extra honored something else about it.
On your knees. On your knees!
So at the end of the day, we have to look at this movie and kind of choose our battle. Do we want to look at it and see it as something that's representative of the Punisher in name only, or do we want to see it as a film that maybe changed some of the fundamentals of the character, but kept the core heart and soul of what makes it the Punisher and delivered a pretty inspired live-action adaptation? Yeah, I'm gonna count this as a Punisher movie, and one that's probably worth watching if you're a fan of this character. But of course, what I'm really interested in is hearing from you guys, so comment below what your thoughts are on this movie, or if you feel inspired to rewatch it. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Like a disease, bring them to their knees. retribution. Oh yeah, we want retribution. Yeah, we ran out of patience. Boil up with the cold hard hatred. I can feel the vibration. Feet in the streets, it's a new sensation.
As we continue to explore the Marvel zeitgeist and revisit the nostalgic early 2000s era of our favorite comic book characters in live action, we're going to be taking a break from the colorful, campy, hopeful, and non-lethal stories that we've covered in previous episodes. Today we're revisiting a darker movie with a story about love, death, resurrection, pain, and what was that last one again?
Punishment.
Hey there, true believers. Today we're talking about 2004's The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane and John Travolta, and debut directed by Jonathan Hensleigh. This film was a product of the great Marvel IP sell-off that landed characters like Spider-Man in the hands of Sony and the X-Men in the hands of 20th Century. The Punisher was one of many characters to be sold to Artisan Entertainment in the year 2000 as part of a deal to make multiple lower-budget Marvel films and TV shows. This movie is filled with action, drama, stoic staring, and lots of guns.
Just remember one thing. I've got more guns than you do.
But how does it hold up against today's standards? I guess we'll find out in today's episode of Marvel Revisited. The Punisher, aka Frank Castle, is a former special ops agent whose tactical training and knowledge of self-defense and firearms are his only superpowers. Well, that and the ability to take a serious ass-kicking. Frank's first appearance was in Marvel's The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 129 in February of 1974. He was originally presented as an anti-hero from the very start, as he begins as an adversary to our friendly neighborhood web-slinger. This character was created by Marvel's Jerry Conway, who stated that the Punisher was based on a character called the Executioner, a Vietnam veteran turned serial killer in the popular book series by Don Pendleton. After his run-in with Spidey in the comics, readers around the country were begging for more stories following this dark-suited and white-booted vigilante. The Punisher would get his own comic book series, of course, in the early 80s, and would go on to become one of Marvel's most highly coveted and highly merchandised properties. Drop a like on this video if you've seen one of these bumper stickers. Also, subscribe for the best in movie content. Okay, thanks. The Punisher was such a hit with readers, in fact, that in 1989 a live-action adaptation was made starring Dolph Ludgren with the now liquidated Carolco Productions. The movie is largely forgotten by general audiences, but considered an underappreciated gem by others.
See you in hell, Castle.
Dad!
Tommy!
The production of this movie began in 2003 after first-time director Jonathan Hensleigh signed on with a treatment for the film. The script was also written by Hensleigh, although due to the nightmarish resource cuts and constant need to reshape the script to match the film's hemorrhaging budget, the studio demanded constant rewrites to the script. It was said that Hensleigh pitched a script that would require a budget of $64 million, which was the standard amount at that time for an action movie.
Get up. Wheel the money out.
But he was only given a budget of $33 million. This, of course, resulted in a much more contained film with smaller sets, which I actually think adds more to the movie overall. When it came to casting, Hensleigh has stated in interviews that Thomas Jane was the only actor that he and universally despised producer Avi Arad ever considered to play Castle. Depending on your taste, you may find this casting to be strange, and so did Thomas Jane because he turned down the offer. Twice.
Both of them.
But eventually they were able to rope in old Tommy for the role, and Jane states that he does not have any regrets playing the character. In fact, through the experience of preparing for the role, Thomas Jane read a bunch of Punisher comics and even trained with Navy SEALs to get in shape for filming. John Travolta was cast as Howard Saint, a money-laundering enterprise owner with an army of generic mobsters in black suits to fulfill his every sadistic request. Travolta stated in an interview that he was drawn to the fun of playing a villain. He quotes, "Well, when it's well written and well directed, it's always a joy to play the bad guy." The movie also stars Ben Foster. Didn't we see him in an X-Men movie? And Rebecca Romijn. Didn't we see her in an X-Men movie?
No. Okay.
So, we open the movie in Tampa, Florida, with Frank undercover as a German weapons dealer named Otto Krieg. He's selling some guns on a sting operation when the arrest goes awry and causes the death of Bobby Saint, a friend to Mickey, who's buying the guns, and the son of Howard Saint, the head of a crime organization who values nothing more than his family. Frank fakes his death, and we learn that he has just completed his last mission and is now retiring to London to live his dream of being a family man with his wife, Maria, and his son, Will. Frank takes his family to Puerto Rico for a family reunion, and the movie takes a moment here to give you some levity, bright colors, and warm lighting. It's almost as if John Hensley wanted us to truly savor this moment. Because, well, from here on out, it's blood, sweat, and bullets. Saint finds out where Frank is and wants to avenge the death of Bobby by slaughtering Frank's entire family.
His family. His whole family.
This scene is so intense even after all of these years. The body count is high, the kills offer spectacle and creativity, and the drama of the scene translates so well that you can definitely buy into the stakes of the situation. At least enough to overlook the question of how the f did no police show up during this entire shootout. Well, Saint's goons successfully murder every member of Castle's family, including his wife and son. Frank ends up captured by the henchmen, and after being shot repeatedly, beaten down, and blown up, he's presumed dead by Saint's men. Frank is found still breathing but nearly dead by Candelaria, the local witch doctor who rescues Frank and treats him back to health. With a second chance at life, Frank decides to seek out Howard Saint and plots to destroy his entire hustle, his family, and his life from within. I'd say Thomas Jane gives his best performance within the first act of this movie. Not that there's anything wrong with his performance in the rest of the movie, but the range of emotions he delivers here, from happy to relieved to adrenaline-filled and focused to heartbroken and hollow, it's just some good acting, that's all I'm saying. Frank returns to Tampa, where he rents a room in a borderline abandoned apartment building where he has only 3 neighbors.
And Bumpo's the... Well, you can probably figure out which one Bumpo is.
Frank's neighbors are all friends that really see themselves as a family. As they begin to understand who Frank is, they want nothing more than to just invite him into that family. More on that later. So, word is starting to spread that Castle is alive, and he enlists the help of Mickey, a disgruntled low-level employee of Saint's and the one partially responsible for Bobby's death. And the game is on. See, Castle's plan isn't just to hunt down and pop Howard Saint and then call it a day. Frank wants to slowly destroy the most important things in Howard's life one by one. He wants Saint to feel what he felt.
No, he misses his family and he wants to die.
So from here it becomes a game of cat and mouse, with both parties thinking they're the cat. While Frank is quietly and secretly putting his pieces into play, Howard and his right-hand man Quentin, played by Will Patton, hire a skilled and eccentric hitman to find Frank and take him out. This chase and kill scene is absolutely taken right out of the early 2000s action movie Handbook. It's got the feel of something out of Death Proof while also having that sweaty and gloomy Florida environment. Frank takes out the assassin in a rather gruesome way. And now with a bone to pick, Frank kicks his plan to take down the Saints into the next gear. While Howard is slowly losing control of his business, thanks to Frank, and beginning to suspect his beloved wife Livia may be having an affair with his best friend Quentin, also thanks to Frank, Frank's neighbors stage a fake emergency to trick him into having dinner with them as roommates. This is perhaps the only other scene in this movie that's even close to happy. And then... This scene with Kevin Nash as the Russian is probably the scene that most casual viewers will remember most from this movie. It's basically a tour of Castle's grungy apartment and low-tech headquarters by way of an epic brute force showdown between Nash and Jane. This scene is brutal, bloody, and... Saint is beginning to get desperate after repeated attempts to have a hitman kill Frank have failed. By this point, the wheels are coming off and Saint is becoming desperate to take back control of the war with the Punisher. Saint sends his goons over to Frank's apartment where Frank is hiding under the floor, recovering from his fight with the Russian. Dave and Bumpo have to face Saint's men in order to keep Frank's location secret, and Dave pays a very unfortunate price for his loyalty. I mean, seriously, ow.
You think you know about pain, boy? You think you know about pain?
In case Frank's entire family being gunned down by a gang of psychos wasn't enough motivation, Frank is now beyond ready to execute that final stage of his plan and take down the Saints once and for all. There's a nice sincere moment where Frank talks to Dave about why he protected him, and you can see Frank start to remember that there can be good in the world, even where tragedy is most apparent.
You're one of us. Your family.
Okay, back to the ass kicking. Frank had been secretly setting up Quentin and Livia to look like they're having an affair throughout the entire time that he's been back from the dead. He slowly planted enough pieces to cause Howard to accuse them of the affair and refuse to hear any explanation from either person. This culminates in Howard killing his best friend and wife in cold blood without any idea that they were never having an affair.
Howard, Quentin was gay.
Frank goes to Saint's nightclub where there's over a dozen hired guns awaiting to attack him. Of course, Frank tactfully eliminates every single one of them and heads to find Howard for the final kill on his list. At this point, we've seen Frank fully embrace the fact that this is his sole purpose in life. He believes that the only reason for him surviving the attack in Puerto Rico was to punish those responsible. Frank reveals to Howard that he had made him kill his own wife and best friend, giving him the chance to feel the tragic struggle and heartbreak that Saint had caused Frank. And then, this happens. The movie ends with something that could welcome a sequel, but could also serve as a standalone film. Basically, Frank Castle is dead, and the world has given birth to the Punisher.
Call me the Punisher.
After revisiting this movie, I can't say I didn't enjoy it. While it maybe isn't as memorable as some of the superhero flicks we got in the early 2000s, it does hold up to me and many others out there. The movie opened up in the US in April of 2004 and was second highest grossing movie that weekend, being beaten only by Kill Bill Volume 2. The movie ended its box office run with $54.7 million, which didn't stir up much interest in a sequel. Or so you would think. Despite having a mostly negative critical response and a mixed audience response, there was plans for a second installment to be directed again by John Hensley and to star Thomas Jane once again. The plan was to introduce Jigsaw as the next villain and show Castle as a more established vigilante. The movie and its script sat on the shelf for over 3 years before it was canceled in favor of a reboot, The Punisher Warzone. Yikes. But years later, fans would see Thomas Jane return as the Punisher in the viral short film titled Dirty Laundry, which premiered at San Diego Comic-Con in 2012. And of course, most recently, there has been the Netflix series The Punisher, which ran for 2 seasons but was canceled when Disney Plus took back their rights to the show. You know, I enjoyed this movie, and despite the ridiculous early 2000s tropes, the obscene number of Punisher skull bumper stickers, and the hairpiece that John Travolta wore the entire time, I still enjoyed it. But of course, the question remains, what did you think of this movie? Comment down below. Thank you all for tuning into the show, and we hope to see you again next time on Marvel Revisited.
I'd like to go to the club. Need a martini.
2008 was a wild year for superhero movies. We received a wide-ranging spectrum of films with varying degrees of acclaim and quality. We got to see the birth of the MCU with Iron Man, we saw the Hulk make another comeback to the big screen, and we even got one of the most beloved superhero films of all time with Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. And hidden away in this treasure chest of caped media from 2008 is Lexi Alexander's neon-soaked and blood-drenched crime drama, Punisher Warzone.
This is where the Punisher comes in.
Punisher Warzone is a Lionsgate film that is widely forgotten by the masses, but remembered by fans of the character. This film stars the late Ray Stevenson as Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, and he's about 5 years into his career as a brutal and violent vigilante. But when Frank accidentally crosses the line between hero and villain, he's forced to make things right while also taking down his biggest threat yet. Now, this movie was originally set to be a sequel to 2005's The Punisher, which we covered in a previous episode, and some of the DNA of that script made its way into the final version, and I recall renting this movie when it came out and having a different opinion of it then than I do now. But today, the most important question is, of course, how does this movie hold up all these years later? And really, this is my journey into learning to love The Punisher Warzone.
No more distractions. We need to focus on my goals.
Now, when I say I'm learning to love this movie, I mean that. When I first saw it, I was still high on how much I loved Thomas Jane's take on the character under the direction of Jonathan Hensley in the previous Punisher movie, which is vastly different from this version. I remember being let down by the lack of story, the wooden performances, and general aesthetic of the movie. It was something that left me feeling more distant from the character than ever before, and I wasn't exactly sure how to feel about what I had just watched. The film was directed by successful TV director Lexi Alexander. She's directed and written for shows like Arrow and How to Get Away with Murder, and the cult classic film Green Street Hooligans, which definitely has some parallels within the direction and aesthetic of this movie as well. Originally, Jonathan Hensley was offered to come back, and he planned to make a direct sequel to his Punisher film, with Jane returning as the titular character. After multiple setbacks behind the scenes and constant changes to the script, Jane and Hensley both dropped out, with Thomas Jane stating the following: "What I won't do is spend months of my life sweating over a movie that I don't believe in. I've always loved the Marvel guys, and I wish them well." Jane would of course get a chance to reprise the role one more time in the viral short film called Dirty Laundry, which was an unofficial follow-up to the 2005 film.
You know the difference between justice and punishment.
What?
I also must mention a few important things before we get into the rest of this review. I love Ray Stevenson, and I love him as the Punisher. His build, his age, his attitude, his performance, all of it works for me in this hyper-violent vigilante flick. I actually think Ray Stevenson and his more tactical riot suit look are probably my favorite take on the character when it comes to actually playing the role. Nothing against Lundgren or Jane or Bernthal, but Stevenson is Castle.
I see you anywhere near hell, I'll kick your ass up.
I also want to say that after multiple times watching this movie for research, I've gained a new respect for the entire movie in general, so forgive the criticism throughout this video if you're a die-hard Warzone defender. The movie picks up with Castle already established as the Punisher. He's living in New York City and is fully well known by the city and the police department as a violent criminal hunter. Castle is working with a partner in this movie too, Micro. He's played by legendary funny man Wayne Knight, who serves as Frank's weapons assistant and guy in the chair. Frank heads to take out a local crime family and gets caught up in a firefight with Billy the Beaut, one of the family's top earners. In the process, Frank knocks Billy into a glass crushing machine at a recycling plant and severely disfigures Billy's face.
My looks have nothing to do with this.
This actually is something that I've come to appreciate. See, Billy is presented at first as kind of a pretty boy. He's obsessed with his looks and is known just as much for being handsome as for being violent. In a way, his origin takes on a parallel of Frank's origin, with the only thing Billy truly loves, his looks, getting taken away from him. Now, at first I thought this was silly, but there are multiple points within the movie where Billy, now calling himself Jigsaw, will display how devastated he is about losing his face. Maybe he'll give someone a look when they mention his face, or maybe he'll shed a tear after catching his reflection in the mirror, but I believed it this time. Dominic West is an interesting actor. I wouldn't say he's on the same level as some of the best movie villains, but he certainly is dialed into the silliness and insanity of the role. And make no mistake, this movie is silly. Jigsaw is one of the most popular Punisher villains, but his origin is different depending on what version you're familiar with. But it pretty much always involves a mob dude getting his face destroyed and being very unhappy about it. This version, if nothing else, is a deeply layered villain. Jigsaw is unmercifully violent, yet insecure and openly emotional, while at the same time being completely out of his mind insane, but not as insane as his older brother, Looney Bin Jim.
Not Looney Bin Jim, not LBJ, James.
Jigsaw and his men want revenge on Castle, but first they need to break Jigsaw's brother, Looney Bin Jim, out of the mental institution he's being held in.
I'm gonna get my applesauce back.
Jim is crazy. I don't mean crazy like how the Joker's crazy. I'm talking about Hannibal Lecter meets Cletus Cassidy meets that crackhead from Friday. These two guys are very interesting. They clearly love each other in a way that actually seems genuine. They definitely care about each other at the very least, and in that way, there are one or two moments that add some kind of refreshing complexity to these otherwise ridiculous villains. There's a scene where Jigsaw and Looney Bin Jim are recruiting local gangs to help them take out Castle, and it's straight out of a comic book in the most corny yet entertaining way possible. Meanwhile, Castle is looking to retire and isn't aware that Jigsaw and his army are coming for him. See, while half of the movie focuses on the villains and their revenge plot, the other half is telling a much more interesting and heartfelt story. Or at least it's attempting to.
It's a fucked up system you're sworn to protect. Never said it was perfect.
While Frame was taking down the crime family in the beginning, he accidentally shot and killed an innocent undercover police officer. Frank learns that the man he accidentally killed left behind a surviving wife and daughter, and Frank isn't exactly sure how to move on from it. In order to make it right for the family, Frank attempts to deliver them a large sum of the mob's money, which he stole during the opening scene. This brings up a very interesting point in the film that I wish they would have focused on more. Who punishes the Punisher?
Who punishes you?
Similar to Alan Moore's iconic "Who Watches the Watchmen" commentary, this movie calls into question that same principle. Frank killed an innocent person. He took something away from the city that he's dedicated to protecting. Who punishes him for that? Well, unfortunately, that's about as far as the idea goes before we're back in the neon-soaked streets and seeing the most incredibly bloody and disturbing kills that the Punisher has ever done. The violence in this movie is kind of awesome. I used to find it gratuitous, and believe me, it really is. But it's also committed to it in a way that makes it fun. We see things like parkour meth heads getting blown up mid-backflip. We get Frank just punching his way through someone's face and multiple heads exploding right off their shoulders. For Punisher fans who like it rough, this movie doesn't scratch the itch, it skewers it with a decorative sword.
No, everything is not okay. Follow me.
With Jigsaw and his men looking for revenge, they kidnap the wife and daughter that Frank is trying to help and lure Frank into an abandoned apartment complex where hundreds of gang members and killers are waiting for him. The final battle of the movie is by far the most entertaining part of this movie. There's so much to see, and the colors are fully saturated and the cast is at their most over the top. It's definitely indulgent, it's definitely wacky, and it's definitely awesome. And the color grade of this movie looks like something out of Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy film. Everything is soaked in neon and rain, and it used to look a little too early 2000s for me, but now I kind of appreciate it, and I don't think the silliness of this movie would play through as well if it looked more subdued. It's honestly kind of a pleasant contrast to the utter darkness of the movie's tone. Frank doesn't go into the battle completely alone though. He has a local police accomplice named Detective Soap, who just really wants to be Frank's friend.
I've shadowed his every step for the last 5 years.
This guy is in a whole other movie, if you ask me. It feels like he thought he was acting in something more like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but it kind of works for me. He's silly, for sure, but he's also real. I mean, he's just a cop who knows he's breaking the law by helping the Punisher, but he's terrified of what'll happen if he doesn't help him. And as a result, he's kind of neutral and a light character that balances out Frank's dark and stoic character. Also forced into the mix is recent transfer agent and former crooked cop Paul Budiansky. He's tough enough to catch and detain Frank, only to end up helping him and letting him go. Kind of.
You're not going there.
In the end, this movie just feels like a classic 80s action film. There's nothing groundbreaking going on, but you'll be entertained and visually stimulated, and if you're a Punisher fan, you might even enjoy it. There's a music video vibe to the cinematography and editing, and it definitely feels sort of kinetic and jumpy, but it does make for an engaging spectacle. The ending of the movie shows Frank being forced to choose between saving Micro, his right-hand man and best/only friend, and the young daughter of the family that Jigsaw kidnapped. It shocked me seeing the way that this scene played out. Frank being forced to choose led to the death of his partner. This moment was surprisingly mature and heartfelt in a way that stands out from the rest of the movie. It really felt like the stakes of the situation were real, and it made it even harder to watch. Frank decides not to retire as he realizes that there's still work to be done for the Punisher. You know, by the time the credits started rolling, I actually gave a shit about this movie. And in the previous times I'd watched it and rewatched it, I couldn't say that was the case. The corny dialogue that once annoyed me suddenly seemed tolerable, and the flashy greens and pinks that used to give me a headache became something fun to get lost in. And the performances that I once considered terrible snapped into perspective, and I understood that these actors were hamming it up on purpose because they knew at the end of the day, Punisher Warzone is fun.
That was fun.
Revisiting this movie was kind of rewarding. I think it's something that I avoided because I assumed that my mind was made up, but for the people that see something in this movie, now I get it.
I mean, contrary to popular belief, people can change.
And for those who still don't like it, I also get it. But one thing cannot be argued. Ray Stevenson rules.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
I'm about to go off like a weapon. Fuel to the top, got a filled up engine. In my thoughts, obsession. I will not stop, no, I'm never second guessing. I got a God complex. Haters love to hate, but I never feel pressed. Got a lot on my plate, but I never get stressed. I'll take all the pressure like I'm acing this test. Tear it up like I'm Jason. I see the world like it's ready for the taking. I see this place like a game I'm playing. Straight to the bank to collect my payments. No negotiations, it's my way, I was born impatient. And like a damn Freemason, I'll run this nation.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.